we really need to connect with our politicians and health policy makers.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 119 of the Strokecast. Dr. Dileep Yavagal from the University of Miami returns this week. You can listen to the previous chat I had with Dileep over at strokecast.com/Dileep, where we talked mostly about stem cell therapy and the acute phase of stroke recovery. In this episode, we actually get an update on stem cell therapy and find out just where Dileep's research has been going. Then we're really going to dive deeper into Dileep's other project, Mission Thrombectomy, which is focused on doubling the number of thrombectomies performed around the world. So now, let's talk with Dileep, joining us on the Strokecast once again. It's been a couple of years, and I'm thrilled to have you back.
Absolutely, Bill. It's really such a pleasure to reconnect with you and chat about lots of exciting stuff that's been happening with stroke treatments, and happy to do the chat with you.
It's really amazing just how fast this stuff is continuing to evolve over the past couple decades and now even over the past couple of years. So, I mean, the last time that we talked, the focus of our discussion was about your work on inserting donor stem cells into a stroke survivor's brain in the early days of stroke, 2 to 3 days after onset. We were 2 to 3 years away from a treatment if things went really well then. So, I mean, where do we stand today with that?
Yeah, so I wish I could say that we have the treatment approved. We certainly have made progress. The data from the large animals is now complete, which is probably quite important to the FDA to let us do a larger study. Just to recap, we've done a study of inserting the patient's own cells from the bone marrow in 48 patients and shown it to be safe. That was a small phase 2 study, phase 2A, and it wasn't designed to really check for benefit because the numbers were so small. About half the patients among the 48, or a little more than half, got the cells, the others got placebo, and there was complete safety seen with giving cells into the artery going to the brain on the side of the stroke. So since then, we really focused on getting all the data on the donor cells being inserted in animal models to the FDA. And they obviously are quite rigorous, as they should be, and asked for a number of additional things, but they're all ready now. So we don't have the treatment for the patients approved just yet, but I think we are inching closer. And I do feel optimistic, actually, that the pandemic has accelerated some of the approval stuff at the FDA, which is, not something one would expect, but I think some of the processes have gotten faster. So we are inching closer, and the funding for biologics and gene therapy and cell therapy has also grown. So I'm optimistic that this year, 21, could be the year where we get funded, we get approval for the cells to be tested, and then by 22, or late 22 or early 23, we could get to a treatment. I mean, that's still an aggressive timeline, but that's certainly what I'm batting for.
The impact of the pandemic has really been such a tremendous learning opportunity for how to do things remotely, how to do things safely and quickly at the same time, and help isolate what's protecting patients versus what is just bureaucracy that we don't need.
Right.
As you've been doing more of the research and getting more into it, what do you sort of currently see as the obstacles to effective acute stroke treatment with stem cells?
I think the obstacles are still getting the trial done fast enough. The number of people who are doing studies has gone up, which is a good thing for stroke patients, but that also means that there are different studies that take up stroke patients in different directions, and you can't be in two studies at the same time. That's a problem of riches, which is okay. We're trying new different treatments. There are several patients who get a lot better after the thrombectomy, and so then they're so good that they don't need stem cells. So, which is also great. I mean, we really are focusing our stem cells to extend the window from 24 to 48 hours and address the almost 50% or more patients who do not qualify within the 24 hours, and address the 50% who, despite getting...
So, Dileep, thanks for...
don't completely recover. So there is enough stroke disease burden for us to target with stem cells. So I'm not, I think the stem cells are very much needed, but the part of getting the clinical trials done is an obstacle. One of the things that I am pursuing is to do trials not only in the US or a trial in the US, but also do trials outside of the US with other, researchers outside the US, so that we could move this along faster. So it's the typical challenges of getting clinical trials done. I think they are all very surmountable.
I think what's really amazing is just the fact that any of these trials can function at all, because when you're talking about that 24 to 48 hour time frame, you're talking about you have to wait for somebody to have an ischemic stroke and get to a hospital that is doing that treatment and have it be an appropriate potential treatment and convince them or their caregiver to consent to participating in this study. And that's a lot while somebody's life is currently turned upside down in a very short amount of time. So that's kind of amazing.
I agree with you. And in fact, I'm really looking to innovations in clinical trial methodology that I think people are, actively pursuing, and perhaps the pandemic has accelerated that part also, where these steps can be done faster, better. Certainly, I have to say that remote consent has really come to the fore, where we don't have to have the relative in the hospital because they can't be with COVID. Technology was there, but people were reluctant and not willing to invest in that. But now there is no choice. So I think these are some of the advances, as you alluded to, due to the pandemic that are good. And I think they will help more getting more clinical trials done. But I agree with you. There are some more methodologic advances that are needed where we get consent, but it's done, quicker. The understanding of randomization is one of the biggest obstacles. When I tell a patient or patient's family that you'll get either stem cells or salt water, they're like, what? No, just give me stem cells. Why? So, and then to really say that the goal of the trial is not just for your benefit, it is for the society's benefit. And in fact, the primary goal is research and societal benefit. So the whole understanding in that critical moment of facing a disaster and having to make a decision about doing something for societal benefit is a major challenge. And it's, like you said, we are very thankful to so many research participants who actually do that decision. But I think there needs to be more awareness that this is how research works, especially emergency research, and that people think of this somewhat ahead of time. The awareness about research and research methodology, especially randomized trials, needs to really get out there more, because it's so counterintuitive to someone who's not involved in research.
And I think that's definitely also probably needs to be part of the broader conversation that has to happen at least within the US and perhaps broadly around the world about, just how the idea of a blind study works and placebo treatment versus regular treatment and why it matters, and to be able to actually justify those results as a way of combating a lot of the snake oil that's out there, the bad treatments that are out there, as well as just this general anti-science feel that permeates a lot of the discussions we have around today around broader social issues.
No, I agree with you, and I applaud you for pursuing this as a broader goal through your conversations.
I know obviously your work has been mostly within the chronic phases the acute phases we've been talking about in that first 24 to 48 hours.
Correct.
Are you seeing viable treatments from your research or other research in the industry around helping those in the acute phase in the chronic phase? I keep swapping those. I got to fix that. But heck, I've had a brain injury, so, but in that 12, 24, 36 months after stroke, are you seeing a viable option for stem cell therapy there?
Absolutely. 2 studies clinical trials have addressed this. One is a SandBio study that showed safety, but was neutral. It did not show benefit that's already done, where we gave cells through a small burr hole, through a small hole in the skull, with what's called stereotactic guidance, like a stealth, navigation system that allows us to target the stroke area and give cells there in a chronic situation. It was up, if I remember correctly, 5 years after stroke, starting at 6 months. And then the Pisces study just started about a year and a half ago, or I think maybe actually now 2 years ago in the US as a phase 2 study. The phase 1 and a phase 1B were very promising for safety. So it was brought over from the UK by the company and started here. But that study definitely got badly affected by the pandemic because it's a chronic study. Patients have to travel, and that really had to go on a hold due to the travel issues from the pandemic. So it should restart, I think, now that we have the vaccine coming down the pike. But that is very much a holy grail, just like acute stem cell therapy also, to make it show benefit in clinical trials is also a big goal. But it's very much being pursued. Without a doubt, the largest burden, there is close to over 100 million people with chronic stroke globally. So it needs to be pursued in a big way. So it's very much happening. It is a tougher nut to crack as compared to acute stroke because all the processes have quote unquote calcified. And I mean that in a metaphorical way. So to get through that and get the cells to do a repair is more challenging, to put it simplistically. But I think there is a promising results from the laboratory in chronic stroke, and the translation to clinical medicine is very much being pursued.
Like you said, once you're starting to do months and years afterwards, neuroplasticity has already been working on reallocating functions away from that injured area, and so that certainly complicates things. So to be clear, there are currently no approved stem cell therapies in the United States available in general practice. And if somebody is selling stem cell therapy to long-term stroke survivors, they are not selling an FDA approved therapy at this point. Is that an accurate statement?
Absolutely accurate. And to be re-emphasized as many times as possible, because it's such a, scenario that any of us could fall into. There are compassionate use routes that are still allowed by the FDA when a stroke patient doesn't fit into a trial. They are more bureaucratic and really need a champion physician to take them forward. So it happens. And I've myself done some compassionate uses. But on the other hand, anybody else who's not doing it in an FDA-approved manner really should not be pursuing it, and patients should stay away from that.
That's an important caution because so many people are just vulnerable to any hope, and there's a lot of people out there to take advantage of that.
Right.
So let's shift our focus now a little bit away from the potential future treatments, which are awesome, but to really one of the most effective acute treatments for ischemic stroke today, and that being mechanical thrombectomy. So for those who don't know, what is a mechanical thrombectomy?
A mechanical thrombectomy is a surgery that is minimally invasive and done through a small hole in the groin artery or in the artery in the wrist called the radial artery. The one in the groin is called femoral artery, and we navigate a very long catheter, a microcatheter, all the way from the entry point to the blocked artery in the brain, and use a device or a combination of two devices to remove that blockage, which is due to a clot, and essentially get blood flow going back, restarted again in that area of the brain that was previously suffering due to lack of blood supply. So that's all done in a specialized X-ray operating room called a angiography suite. And this is done, and now what is called a 1A recommended, meaning the highest recommendation possible for a treatment for a type of stroke called large artery stroke or large vessel occlusion stroke, commonly known as LVO stroke. And so this is the most disabling type of stroke one can get. And it is estimated to be anywhere between 20 to 30% of all strokes. And the fact that we have mechanical thrombectomy that is now the top standard of care for LVO stroke is a major advance, not only in stroke care, but in all of medicine. And this is because, first of all, stroke is the number one leading cause of long-term disability. And we first time have a real treatment that can reverse that disability and do that at a overwhelmingly high rate. So that's a big advance in stroke and in medicine in general. And secondly, the time window is in a more feasible range for this treatment, and that is 24 hours. So that's what's mechanical thrombectomy for acute LVO stroke.
That time window has been expanding over the recent years, which is, another one of those things to see happening as part of the ongoing research that is still happening very quickly. For LVO, is the middle cerebral artery considered a large vessel for this process?
Absolutely. The internal carotid artery in the brain, the middle cerebral artery first segment, and the basilar artery that's in the back of the brain are considered the classical large vessel occlusion arteries. So if those are blocked, then they are called LVO stroke. That definition is being extended in the MCA, the middle cerebral artery, to the first part of the M2 segment, the second segment, but classically it's these three arteries that are considered as LVO.
And that's one of those things that, of course, connects with me very closely because in my case, I was a wake-up stroke, meaning that I had my last known good was about 6 hours before I woke up. So in 2017, I was outside the window for TPA and thrombectomy right from the start. But with those windows expanding, there's so many more people who could get treatment that I was just not eligible for back in 2017.
Yeah, no, the advance to 24 hours is critical, as well as wake-up stroke. So absolutely, that has allowed us to treat so many more patients. And what's really, really great news is that the efficacy, the benefit, the magnitude of benefit of even in the wake-up stroke patients and in the patients beyond 6 hours is as high and actually a little bit higher than within 6 hours, which is a little counterintuitive because after 6 hours and for wake up, we have a more stringent selection. We really have to use a more advanced type of imaging to only select patients who have brain tissue that is there's enough brain tissue that's still viable. So in that sense, the benefit makes sense because we are choosing patients who have brain that has not gotten irreversibly damaged. So, but on the other hand, it could have still been the case that the benefit could have been lower in such patients, but it has turned out to be as good or even slightly better.
So, does the fact that a patient may have been given TPA right up front, does that lead to complications if somebody for thrombectomy down the road, or is there no issue with performing thrombectomy on somebody who's already had TPA?
Yeah, there is no issue. And in fact, within 6 hours, the level 1A recommendation, again, the highest recommendation in medicine, is to combine both. But that is for patients who are, in the TPA window and don't have a contraindication. The recommendation is to combine the two. And there are a lot of indicators that suggest that, it's helpful to combine the two. It has to be proven beyond doubt in more randomized trials. But the recommendation is to combine both as long as patients are eligible.
One of the things that is now, of course, unfortunately, driving more strokes these days is COVID-19. And people who have had COVID are now showing a higher incidence of LVO strokes, of that large vessel occlusion, which definitely traditionally would be a great candidate for mechanical thrombectomy. Now, one of the things we're hearing, at least in the general discussion, is that one of the reasons for that is that the impact of COVID is sort of on a gelling of various bodily fluids and sort of general thickening of the blood and things like that are ultimately leading to these clots. Does the nature of a post-COVID infection-induced stroke impact whether or not you can use thrombectomy to treat those patients?
Yeah, great question. So our paper is right now in review on this very topic, and I'm pleased to report to you that our findings have clearly shown that thrombectomy is as effective in COVID-induced LVO stroke as in non-COVID. It's just that there are certainly a subset of patients who have so much clot due to COVID that they don't even end up qualifying, for thrombectomy. In other words, by the time they show up or are discovered, because some of them may be very sick from the pneumonia and such, the CAT scan shows irreversible damage. But those who don't, and a lot of patients who do have stroke and COVID present with stroke as the presenting symptom rather than fever and cough and pneumonia. And there, the mechanical thrombectomy results are as good, both with efficacy and safety, as in non-COVID patients. So that's definitely heartening. On the other hand, LVO stroke comprises about 60% of all COVID stroke, or a little bit more, exactly because of we think what you were referring to, the increased clotting that COVID causes. And so larger clots form and larger arteries get blocked in COVID. But if they show up in the 24-hour window to a thrombectomy center and the CAT scan doesn't show any advanced damage, then they can expect to have a really good result.
And those results and the global pandemic also makes the other program that you are a part of so much more important, the Mechanical Thrombectomy 2020 Plus program. So what is this program?
Yeah, so it's actually a global public health campaign and a global alliance of stroke and neurointerventional experts that we launched actually in 2016 through the Society of Vascular and Interventional Neurology. The initial thought was that the standard of care for LVO stroke that was proven in 2015 is so beneficial and actually very cost effective that it really needs to be disseminated to as many stroke patients who can benefit from it as possible in a global manner. And what I conceived the campaign and founded it under SVIN's infrastructure, and along with several other leaders, developed the approach. And what we realized as we were developing the campaign was that the geographical disparity in stroke burden is just astounding. 80% of all stroke in low and middle income countries that have less than 20% of the world's resources to fight stroke. And this is really staggering, especially I come from India, where I saw a lot of stroke before coming to the US. And the global burden of stroke really will not have even a dent if we were to just focus on high-income countries, because the burden is distributed and it's massive in the low and middle-income countries. So Mission Thrombectomy 2020 was developed to form a horizontal global network of experts that uses public health interventions. So these are more top-down interventions through political, social, and economic approaches that will increase access to thrombectomy in each region in a equitable manner, so that we don't leave big regions of the world behind in getting this effective therapy. And this campaign, I'm happy to report, has now 86 regional committees in 6 continents that are using public health interventions in their respective regions to increase access to thrombectomy in a speedy manner. So that's really the overall conception and design of MT 2020 Plus. And we are very excited that there is a widespread adoption and a lot of enthusiasm to keep implementing public health interventions that are customized to each region, so that we can get mechanical thrombectomy to as many LVO stroke patients as possible.
Forgive my Americanness here, but when I look at this, I mean, obviously training of physicians and neurointerventionists is one thing to be able to go ahead and perform this procedure. But as you said earlier, this is taking place in an angio suite, a specialized ER. We're dealing with a lot of very specialized equipment to navigate those catheters all the way from the groin into the brain, to not get the wrong thing, to have that accurate up to the moment imaging. It's, from an infrastructure standpoint, I mean, this is not even spread completely throughout the U.S. Due to the costs and the required infrastructure. And great, the 24-hour window absolutely makes it more viable to travel to a place with this. But how do you drive this kind of therapy in other parts of the world that don't have the same level of funding, or that just don't have the physical infrastructure to get people to these specialized centers? Yeah,
a very, very good question, and certainly something that could have stopped me sort of dead in the water once I started thinking about it, because of the enormity of the challenge that you mentioned. But I'll just put in a quick quip there, that part of the Americanness is also something that America has done for a long, long time, as being a leader in disseminating new therapies. And so the campaign, I think, very much goes with that spirit. And the good thing is, the most encouraging thing is that despite the number of resources and the amount of resources required, it's something that's quite feasible from all the calculations we've made. And here is why I say that. The barriers to actually adopting or disseminating any new interventional therapy is more in the sort of the awareness and the political acceptance and the political support and the economic support than anything else. Because as much as low and middle income countries and even poorer parts of high income countries find it challenging, once a therapy is cost effective, and let me elaborate on that for a second. So the therapy is expensive, but then the number of years of disability that are saved and the productivity that's saved and the burden on caregivers that's taken away makes this therapy cost effective in even low income countries. And so once that cost effectiveness is really clear, it makes it feasible to really build infrastructure for this therapy in low and middle income countries and even low income areas of high income countries. Just like we have planes flying everywhere, even though it's pretty expensive to fly planes. I think this is where what MD 2020 Plus is trying to do is overcome those barriers that are well known for any new treatment that is expensive by increasing education of health policymakers, of health ministries, of the general public, that now stroke is treatable and thrombectomy is a very powerful therapy, and taking those approaches to accelerate the infrastructure building and therefore accelerate access.
I really like that analogy to commercial air travel being available so widely. I think that's an important way of looking at it. As you've been driving this campaign, what countries or regions have you seen the biggest success in so far?
Time it took us to get regional committees organized and going was about almost 3 years, because our funding for the campaign had to sort of grow slowly. But we've launched the regional committees about 5 months ago, and they have already started making these public health interventions. So I think the actual impact is to be seen in the next few months or so. But I can tell you that countries like China and India have rapidly grown access to thrombectomy since 2018. It's really been great to see. And again, these are the two largest populated countries in the world. So it's still a drop in the bucket, but it's a much bigger drop than it was in 2016. So the metric that we have established for MT 2020, so that we just don't keep flying blindly, so to speak, is to double the numbers of thrombectomy in a given region every 2 years using these public health interventions. So it's again a tall order, but when we design these interventions, we have to be clear that they will really double the numbers and not just increase by 10 or 20 in a given year. So I think the measurement of the impact of these regional committees is now going to be crucial towards the middle of 2021. And I should mention that the pandemic again allowed us to connect with everyone in video conferencing much better than ever before, and really accelerated getting this massive global infrastructure of the campaign going in a very cogent manner. So we are, I think, still in some ways at the initial parts of the whole network having an impact of MP 2020 Plus, but we are very confident that it is going to have a major impact.
Actually, that's great that there has been an upside to the pandemic in that respect. My thought would have been that the pandemic would have just slowed down and created all this distraction and prevented that. But again, with the pandemic driving more stroke and driving improvements in telemedicine and communication and getting more people comfortable with talking over video conference versus having to fly all over the place, that certainly sounds like it has made a difference, especially since one of the key here is influencing those thought leaders in the various places around the world.
Right, absolutely. we really need to connect with our politicians and health policy makers on this and be strong advocates. And I'm optimistic, I think. And I'll tell you one other quick thing, that having this peer network for, doctor volunteers, for MD volunteers is critical, because this is not what we are taught to do. But when you see your peers doing it in one region, you want to do it in your region, and you learn from how they did it. And that we are seeing already, because there is so much communication. We have a global executive committee of all the regional co-chairs on WhatsApp, and they communicate almost on a daily basis saying, this is what we did. In fact, one very exciting development is that the deputy health minister in one of the countries said that they would want to join the regional committee, because they really think this is very important. And we've, in fact, encouraged regional committees around the globe to really get health policymakers to be part of the committee. So I think that a peer network approach is powerful. We are very excited about how MT 2020 is moving forward.
So how can folks who may be listening wherever they are in the globe support the efforts of MT 2020?
The general public is really the most powerful advocate for MT 2020 plus. The infrastructure it takes to actually reach out to the general public is massive in terms of the funding needed. But anybody who's listening should know that they are the actual constituents for policymakers that they care about. The policymakers may listen to doctors, but doctors are a very small fraction of their constituency. If the general public demands that a powerful, highly effective therapy be made available, that the governments and other stakeholders should do everything possible to build the infrastructure so that we don't have long-term disabled people who are suffering away and their families are suffering away, and there is so much economic and social burden when we have such a therapy available. That could make a big difference. That advocacy from the public is what I would request very strongly, and it will go a long way in increasing access to thrombectomy globally.
So reach out, talk to folks, talk to people around in your community about Mission Thrombectomy, about just thrombectomy in general. Demand that your politicians, that your local medical establishments support this. In the U.S., that's asking for more folks to be more hospitals to be focused on stroke, to be all able to offer those services, to become comprehensive stroke centers, and around the world to again just demand that your politicians support making this therapy much more widely available, because 1 in 4 people in this world will have a stroke in their lives. This is a big deal. It could be your own disability that you are minimizing by pursuing this type of therapy.
You're absolutely right, Bill. That's very well put. I agree with it 100%.
So, Dileep, if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
So certainly MT 2020 Plus, all the information is at missionthrombectomy.org. So it's slightly longer, but it's missionthrombectomy.org. And then I can be easily Googled. My work is there. I have a Facebook page, including my lab research page. So yeah, I should be very easily accessible on the internet.
Awesome. And we'll have all of those links available in the show notes and over at strokecast.com, along with a link to our conversation from a couple of years ago where we got even more in depth into the details around stem cell therapy and the technology and the concepts behind it. So Dileep, thanks so much for joining us again. This has been great. I've learned a bunch of stuff, and good luck with this, with continuing to drive more thrombectomies around the world.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity, Bill. Always such a pleasure to talk to you.
And that brings us to our hack of the week. This week's hack comes to us from Sarah Parslow, one of the authors of Falling in Love with the Process, the story of Bill Torres' recovery from his stroke. We spoke with Sarah and co-author Patricia Geist-Martin back in episode 111, and you can listen to that episode over at strokecast.com/process.
I think the last hack as a communication person is really about relationships. I think that one of the things that helped Bill was finding, in this case, a group of ducks who he felt really needed him. He tells us the story of the first time he goes to the duck pond after having a stroke. He sees this duck named Curly, and Curly's beak is all twisted, and so Curly can't really feed himself. He's really kind of starving. It's, sad looking duck. And so Bill takes it upon himself. He's like, I will feed you, Curly. I will come every morning and I will feed you. And this was one motivation for him to get up, get out of the house, figure out how to be mobile, and even though he's still recovering from stroke. So one of the broader hacks, I think, is that you might fall into this feeling that you're the person always receiving care. And other people are your caregivers. And that can feel good sometimes, but it might also feel a little bit like you've lost your independence. And so one thing that might be a good hack is finding someone else or something else that needs care from you. Who can you feed? And using that as a way to inspire yourself to keep going each day.
There are two main points I want to emphasize from today's discussion. First, stem cell therapy is promising, and the tests and research are ongoing. However, there is no approved stem cell therapy for stroke in the U.S. at this point. No one has yet scientifically proven that stem cells are an effective treatment for stroke. They might be, and we absolutely have reason to be optimistic, but we just don't know for sure yet. Folks who are out there treating stroke with stem cells legitimately are doing it as part of official research projects, which also means there is no cost to the patient. What that means is that if someone tries to sell you stem cell therapy at this point, run away. It is not an approved treatment. If you want to participate in a research study, there should be no cost if it's legitimate. Hopefully, the studies will be positive and we'll have effective therapy soon. Second, on a more positive note, MT 2020, Mechanical Thrombectomy 2020, is moving hard to obviate the need for stem cell therapy anyway by reducing the damage a stroke can do quickly. One challenge with spreading thrombectomy around the world is, of course, the cost of training, the angiography suite, and the specialized medical equipment. None of that is cheap. But Dileep's comparison to jet travel is helpful. I mean, even developing countries around the world have airplanes and airports supporting jet travel, especially in the pre-COVID times. Because, you see, when it's a high enough priority, governments can make things happen. And increasing mechanical thrombectomy ought to be a higher priority, given how many people it can save and how much it can reduce future disabilities. Visit missionthrombectomy2020.org to learn more. And be sure to check out the show notes over at strokecast.com/MT2020 to learn more about Dileep and Mission Thrombectomy. If you have the opportunity to drive interest in mechanical thrombectomy in your own community, please do what you can. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, colleague, or relative by giving them the link strokecast.com/MT2020. And of course, as always, don't get best. Get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you soon.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.